A big day for India today. Budget 2022 is going to be announced under the shadow of Omicron virus variant. Now, India is set to announce its annual budget today at 11 a.m. with Indian Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman presenting it. This is the second budget after global COVID pandemic started in 2020. It comes at a time when third wave of COVID infections has just started to decline. India is inching towards fully vaccinating its adult population. But while economic growth is beginning to revive, concerns about inequality and employment remain. Economists are expecting measures that support growth and also allow government to reduce its debt accumulation. The likely priorities for budget would be focusing on restoring jobs, supporting sectors affected by pandemic, banking sector reforms, climate policies and measures to boost health and education sectors. India's fiscal deficit target for new year will also be closely watched by investors and rating agencies. A fiscal deficit is the gap between a government's income and spending, and it implies that country is spending more than it's earning. India plans to set its deficit target between 6.3 to 6.5 of GDP. This is a touch lower than current year's target of 6.8%, which Finance Minister has said was necessary to get Indian economy back on track after the pandemic derailed its growth. And like any other year, there is a demand for income tax relief for common man as well. This year, the calls are louder, given how employment and incomes have suffered. Purchasing power too has been eroded due to rising retail inflation. But experts do not expect any significant changes to tax structure. India, which is set to regain world's fastest growing economy title, will likely prioritize growth over fiscal consolidation by boosting spending. To discuss all that and much more, today we are joined in WION studio by Professor Makarand R Paranjape, who is the former director of IIAS. He is professor of JNU as well. Well, thanks for talking to us. First of all, sir, second time we are seeing under the shadow of coronavirus. New variant, though overall impact has been less. What are the overall expectations from budget? Will there be a big bang budget this time?
Well, I think the most important thing is to build on the infrastructure, boost employment, and reduce the suffering of the common people. But when I looked at the economic survey yesterday, which was published, as well as the statistical analysis, we've actually done really well, given the tremendous challenge we faced. And I also listened to the press conference of the new Chief Economic Advisor of India, Dr. Nageshwaran, and of course Sanjeev Sanyal, who prepared the economic survey. So I've been looking at it last night, and I think that the numbers are very encouraging in India.
We'll just take a pause here. We can see Finance Minister with the budget documents here. She's standing outside North Block, the ministry where all these budget documents are prepared. Finance Minister Sitharaman, she's now heading to Parliament to present budget documents. Budget like from the last few years, this time also it's an e-budget, keeping COVID protocols in mind. And Finance Minister Sitharaman, we can see her here. She's sitting in a car taking the budget documents to the Parliament. Remember, budget will be presented in Parliament at 11 a.m. today. Once again, we can see Sitharaman, Finance Minister of India, coming with the budget documents. Many challenges, but opportunities also remain as far as budget is concerned. So coming back to you, sir, talking about India's overall stand in the global economies, what are the challenges you think which are there for India, and what are the opportunities as well which we can definitely take and become better, we can improve our positioning in the overall global economies?
See, as you know, the economic survey shows that we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world. I mean, compared to last year, we grew at more than 9%. But if you go to the pre-COVID rate of growth of GDP, then we have only grown 1.8% compared to the pre-COVID. So COVID has been a huge hit, and now oil prices are also going up. But the economic survey says that they've averaged out and are predicting, if not predicting, expecting oil prices to be around $70. Now it's over 90. So keeping all these things in mind, I think that I'm very optimistic. As we come out of COVID, the third wave, Omicron, as you mentioned, seems to be tapering off everywhere. As we come out of COVID, I think the prospects for the Indian economy are very, very bright.
All right. So last year we saw many challenges. India is trying to convert some of these challenges into opportunities.
Yes.
One of them is chip shortage and supply chain crisis. Where does India stand as far as chip shortage and manufacturing chip is concerned? What about getting or being an alternative to China as far as for global factories and global industries are concerned?
I think we're still quite a distance away when it comes to chips, because it's even China is behind, I guess, Taiwan and other countries, and all the innovative work in this is going on in the US, of course. But we have to begin somewhere, and I think that there are headwinds now which show that the Chinese economy is tapering off. They have a lot of deficits, and there are a lot of loans. There's a lot of bad debt there. So this is a great chance for India to come up in the world. And what really enthuses me, because the important thing is that if you look at the Economic Survey of India, it's a very well-designed document which is readable for all educated citizens. And you can see that, Sanjeev Sanyal talks about what he calls the barbell strategy, which is that you are trying to prepare for eventualities on both sides, And I think that what is confidence-inducing is the smart people who are very clued into whatever is happening all over the world. And for instance, liquidity is going to be, tapered down all over the world.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
we have to prepare for tightening up, of our, liquidity. And also, as you mentioned earlier, the deficit has to be kept under control. But, to sum up, the greatest achievement of the country was reaching food and essentials to the common people who were hurt by COVID. And the number of beneficiaries is a world record. And also in our vaccination drive, we have made tremendous progress.
Mr. Paranjape, we'll come back to stock markets because that has been one of the biggest talking points last year. It's going to open in the next 6 minutes. We'll come back to stock markets also. That's something I wanted to discuss with you. But before that, I would like to ask you, the inching up of crude prices. Well, crude we have seen going to negative territory in 2020. Now it's touching $100 and estimates say $150 to a barrel. How bad is it going to be for developing economies like India?
Well, I was reading some forecasts from the IMF, and they are predicting that oil prices will come down a little. So they won't be above $100 level for so long. But you're right, the demand is increasing and will increase even more as the economies of the world, get back into gear. And obviously one of our greatest export, bills comes from, import bills comes from oil.
80%. Yes.
80%. So we have to factor in that, and the Economic Survey is, planning on oil prices being around 70, 75, in that range, which is an average, right? So it is a big factor, but government has mopped up a lot of money in the last year by excise and revenue on oil, which of course has an inflationary effect. Because if you increase oil prices, common people get affected, and the prices of food and vegetables, everything goes up. But even so, we have good reserves. We have over $600 billion of reserves. So overall, I feel very optimistic in terms of how we are handling the situation, the global crisis. And, our leadership, I feel, is very competent and I would think on top of the situation. Now, this seems like an exaggerated comment to make, but when you look at all the indicators and the growth in infrastructure, the growth in highways, the growth in the PM Awas Yojana, and most important, people who suffered a lot, who lost jobs, had to go back to villages. The food program in India is so incredible that, anybody who is really needy and who has been hurt by the pandemic has been looked after by the welfare state. And revenue collections are very good. So that's also, despite the pandemic, a very good sign.
Let's talk about building competency. Export is one of the sectors which definitely is something where improvement is always needed. Exports last year, well, on some parameters we have done well, but there is a lot that is to be done to being competitive in the market. What, according to you, is the overall situation as far as exports are concerned? How and why? Where should we? What sectors should we look at now?
See, exports actually went up last year, which is again a very encouraging sign. And in the press conference, Sanjeev Sanyal said that there was a container crisis. Otherwise, we could have moved out more than we did. But I think that Make in India was a very big push, and we have to build on that Make in India push. And also there are certain sectors we are very good at, gems, gold, and software. Software is a huge sector for us. The IT industry did very well throughout last year. Most of our top tech companies have very good bottom lines. So I think that the right policies of the government, and the great thing about last year, if you look at all the figures, is that government spending led the way. And there are so many unicorns in India.
Absolutely. Startup is a very interesting
This is the startup ecology of India is very encouraging. And in fact, Delhi has overtaken Bengaluru as the startup capital of India. That means there's a lot of confidence and talent in the country, and we have to harness it and unleash it.
Absolutely. So startups coming, we can have a quick discussion on startups now, where startups, unicorns, PM Modi also said that unicorns are the future of India, and startups are in fact the future of India. What has changed according to you over the last 1 or 2 years, and what else is expected? Can you tell us in brief?
I think government policy is the most important, spur or trigger or encouraging factor for startups. See, you have to create an ecology where people feel confident to both invest and innovate. And I'm afraid we have a long way to go, because our regulatory systems have to be simplified. Starting businesses, even winding up businesses is very important. You can't wind up a business in India today easily. So the regulatory regime has to be simplified for startups to grow. And what happens in the news, you have very big startups like, we saw Paytm, Nykaa, and that creates an aspirational atmosphere. But we need, not just megacons, but we need not just unicorns, but we need microcons, So you and I and smaller people should be, not people who are extremely rich, should be able to feel confident to start setting up businesses. That hasn't happened yet. But I believe that gradually we are getting there, and the regulatory apparatus has to be simplified. And also, good ideas should get loans. One of the great things that happened last year is that a lot of the bad banking has been cleaned up. And this is going to create, I believe, a really positive environment when you feel that banks are safer than before. To give out loans, that's the point.
Well, thank Mr. Paranjape. We would like to now shift focus to markets, and Indian markets have opened now. Sensex is up by around a percentage point. It's up by 530 points. Currently, as we speak, Nifty is also up by the same percentage points. It's open in green. So some expectations building there as well. We can see over the last few days, markets were in a red zone. They were falling, but in the last 1-2 days, markets have again picked up momentum. Today, we have to look what are the markets going to do today. Sensex, as we speak, is up by around 0.9%, up by 530 points. Last few budgets, we have seen markets scaling new highs. This time also, whether that happens or not, it's a big question. Where do the markets go? Do they gain or do they come down after budget is announced? But Indian markets have opened in green as we speak. If we give some idea about global markets since morning in Asia, they are trading mixed. Nikkei of Japan is up 0.7%, Shanghai down 0.97%. Hong Kong, Australia, Kospi of Korea, they're all up. So markets clearly give an indication what is expected of budget. And markets clearly are in a positive zone as we speak. Since morning, they have opened in green today now. Over the last 1 year, in 2021, markets have been on a bull run. Whether that's maintained or not, that's a big question. This year in 2022, we saw a host of IPOs coming in 2021. Many people opened the account. So Indian markets, once again, they have become independent to some extent. And as we speak today, they are trading in green. So expectations are building up from budget. So coming back to you, Mr. Paranjape, last year, we saw market scaling new high, 60,000 we touched. Later on, we came down though. IPOs came. What about stock markets this year? Right now, as we speak, markets are clearly hopeful of something good happening. They are in green territory over the last few days. Since the US interest rates, the signals were there, they were coming down, but now they are going up as we speak. FIs have taken out a lot of money this month as well. What are your overall assessment of stock markets?
Well, you know, I think that yesterday the markets went up, and that was a thumbs up to the economic survey and the data that came out from the economic survey. But the Fed's statements indicate a tightening of liquidity, and we cannot expect the markets to keep soaring. There has to be a correction. There's already been a correction, and you know, the budget, the markets may again, depending on how the budget goes, you know, give some positive signals, but we can't expect the markets to go up and up. And I don't think Indian markets have been decoupled. I don't think we are there as yet, though the domestic investor, even small investors, have put a lot of money into the markets, as we know. But I think that when the FIIs sell, our markets will also certainly correct, as has happened in the last few days.
And just another thing about markets. Well, we always keep on discussing and debating whether markets are true picture, they are presenting true picture of the economy. Are they barometer of the economy? Well, definitely they are not that much, but they are, we can say that some optimism is there when there is so much of gloom and doom. What about the optimism now? Is it coming down? Because the markets are also coming down from the past few weeks, I would say, and coming down from peak levels.
No, I don't think we should see the markets as the best indicator of the real economy. No. As you rightly said, markets indicate mood, the mood of investors and the mood of people who have surplus money. So I think the last year's trend was an anomaly because it had to do with the liquidity that was pumped into the system, and that was only to boost the confidence of the world during the pandemic. We didn't want the world to collapse, so I guess the Feds all over the Western world, the rich countries, they pumped liquidity into the markets. But there will be a correction, obviously. But the good news again is that the best companies in India, the better managed companies, companies with low debt, all these companies have done exceedingly well. And I think a lot of small investors have also benefited via the mutual fund route during this, should I say, euphoria that the markets went through. But thankfully, the real economy in India is pretty solid, I think, in terms of the data we've received. Of course, there are, warning signals. A lot of job contraction was witnessed, especially in the unorganized sector. But the government stepped in and bolstered up the people who really needed help through infrastructure and other spending. If you see, one of the key aspects of our economic survey this year is the enormous number of graphs and charts and geo-satellite imaging. And they show you how the highways have progressed, right. For example, how much electrification has happened in India, right. Or simple things like urbanization. Even the golf right. road in Gurgaon has come under the geo-satellite imaging. So I think we've seen a tremendous push right. in infrastructure, which is a good sign.
Yeah, and here I would like to speak to my colleague Mohammed Saleh, who is here. And Saleh, many things are happening on geopolitical front. We have seen for the first time the tensions of this kind between Russia and Ukraine. So Eastern Europe is on the brink of a crisis. UAE and Yemen rebels. There are also a lot of things happening. What do you think of all that signals in the beginning of the year? What does it mean for India as far as economy is concerned, as far as geopolitical and its ties with other nations is concerned?
Absolutely, indeed, Sumit. The fact that, what India will be looking at, especially at a time when, we are focusing on our economy, is at the price of oil. Now, for the first time in almost about 7 to 8 years, the price of oil has inched above the $90 mark. And it is expected, according to analysts, that this could go as high as about $105 within the next 6 months. And as you rightly pointed out, one of the key factors that is driving up the price of oil, firstly, is to do with the demand, because the economy is now getting slowly back into its earlier pace. That has cranked up the amount of demand there is for oil in the international markets. And another are these pressure points. The Ukraine-Russia conflict, firstly, and also about in terms of what's happening in the Middle East, where Yemen, the Houthi rebels, have now tried to expand the area of conflict, bringing in the United Arab Emirates very prominently to picture. This is something, especially considering that India is a net exporter of oil, something that the government will be looking at very, very closely. And also the price of petrol and diesel for the retail consumer like us.
Absolutely.
This is something where a lot of people are talking about it. There's a lot of chatter on the streets,
absolutely,
especially on the Indian streets. The price of petrol, depending on which city that you live in, hovers about 100 rupees per litre. And for the Indian consumer, this is something that directly impacts their purse. And this is something that Nirmala Sitharaman will be looking at very closely.
I'll come back to you, Mr. Paranjape, on this. So government now doesn't have much headroom when it comes to fiscal spending, because as we pointed out, as I discussed with Saleh, crude prices are going up, which means that there's only a point to which you can increase petrol diesel prices. So what we enjoyed last year, government enjoyed last 2 years, was clearly a very good fiscal headroom because they were earning from petrol diesel. What will happen now? Because the earnings will come down, so aren't we limited as far as fiscal headroom is concerned?
Absolutely. The cushion will really be much smaller this time. But in the past, we have subsidized, our own oil marketing companies and others have taken the brunt of some of these disruptions. And as Saleh rightly said, the world is in an unstable position just now vis-a-vis Ukraine and the, Russian standoff in UAE and Yemen. And of course, UAE is part of the Saudi alliance, as you know, and this is the Persian Gulf, where most of the world's oil supply passes through this part of the world. And any disruption, any uncertainty will push up the prices. But here, India is playing a very important role because we are the mediator, we are the middle voice in both these conflicts. Of course, because we have good relations with Iran as well as with Saudis. We have good relations with the Western NATO powers as well as with Russia. So behind the scenes, also, I think India can play a very positive role in this global situation today. But I think that the people, the mandarins, in the South Bloc, North Bloc, are very well aware of what to do with the oil prices.
So, on that note, we are going to slip into a short break on our discussion on budget. We'll come back very soon. WION now available in your country. Download the app and get all the news on the move.